The massive doors to the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through Ambassador Eleanor Vega's bones. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the deliberately cold air, a small psychological tactic employed by the Council to unsettle representatives from warmer worlds. Earth had briefed her on these tactics. They had briefed her on everything they could. Eleanor stepped forward into the cavernous judgment hall, her footsteps echoing across polished stone that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Above her, tiered seating rose in concentric circles 50 meters high, each level filled with delegates from hundreds of different species. Some had too many eyes, some had none at all. All of them were staring at her. Ambassador Vega of Terra approached the center platform, announced High Arbiter Voltuk, his four-armed silhouette backlit against the enormous view screen that dominated the far wall. His voice was artificially amplified to sound deeper, more imposing, another psychological tactic. Eleanor stepped onto the circular platform. It hummed to life and rose slowly into the air, positioning her at the focal point of the chamber where every delegate could see her. A single human woman surrounded by the most powerful governing body in known space. The Galactic Council recognizes Earth for the first time in a formal complaint proceeding, Voltuk continued. You stand before us claiming that the Draxian hegemony violated Article 7 of the Charter by annexing your Proxima Centauri colony. These are serious accusations against a founding member of the Council. In the Draxian section, Ambassador Krex rose to his full height, his scaled skin catching the light as he spread his arms in a gesture of innocence. My government categorically denies these baseless claims. We responded to a humanitarian crisis on Proxima after your colony's environmental systems failed. We saved those we could. Eleanor felt her jaw tighten but kept her face neutral. 2,000 colonists dead in that rescue. Earth's newest colony reduced to ashes, but she hadn't come to rage. She had come with purpose. Distinguished members of the Council, she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. 3 cycles ago, the Draxian hegemony violated our borders, attacked our colony, and annexed a legally recognized human settlement. I have brought evidence of these actions. She tapped the small Earth insignia pin on her lapel, a quantum communicator disguised as a decorative element. The main view screen flickered and began playing footage from Proxima's defense grid. Draxian warships bombarding civilian structures, transport ships firing on unarmed evacuation vessels. This footage was recovered from our colony's emergency data vault, Eleanor explained. The attack was unprovoked and methodical. Ambassador Krex laughed, the sound grating through the chamber's audio system. Cleverly edited propaganda. The Council cannot take such obviously manipulated evidence seriously. High Arbiter Voltuk raised a hand for silence. We have reviewed the submitted evidence prior to this session and found it insufficient to conclusively establish Draxian aggression. The footage contains gaps and could be interpreted in multiple ways. Eleanor had expected this. The Draxians held significant influence over the Council. 3 of their allies sat on the Evidence Review Committee. But she had come prepared for this exact scenario. I understand the Council's position, she said calmly. Evidence can be disputed. Records can be questioned. Which is why Earth did not rely solely on recordings from Proxima. She tapped her pin again. The view screen changed to show a different feed. This one from what was clearly a stealth drone, capturing Draxian ships in formation before they arrived at Proxima. The timestamp was clear, as was the attack order being transmitted between vessels. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Even Voltuk seemed surprised. Humanity may be new to the galactic community, Eleanor continued, but we are not naive. When we signed the Charter, we also implemented the Phantom Protocol, a comprehensive surveillance system monitoring all signatories for treaty violations. The chamber erupted. Several delegates rose in outrage, shouting about sovereignty and privacy. Voltuk pounded his ceremonial staff for order. Such surveillance is itself a violation. Krex bellowed over the chaos. Eleanor remained calm at the center of the storm. Article 23, subsection 7 specifically permits defensive monitoring if reasonable suspicion exists. We suspected the Draxians coveted our colony from the moment they offered protection services. As the chamber gradually quieted, Eleanor tapped her pin a 3rd time. The view screen split to show a live feed of the Draxian homeworld's orbital, defense grid, and the 50 human stealth vessels that had just decloaked around it. The chamber fell completely silent. Earth did not join the stars unprepared, Eleanor said into the silence. We studied history. We recognized patterns, and we developed contingencies for betrayal. She gazed directly at Krex. The Draxians broke the treaty. They believed we would come here begging for justice, that we would be dismissed and sent away to lick our wounds. They were wrong. Eleanor turned to address the entire council. Humanity does not want war. We want justice. The Draxian hegemony must withdraw from all illegally occupied territories and provide reparations for lives lost. The council must establish an independent investigation into their actions. Or, Voltuk asked quietly. Or nothing, Eleanor replied. I am a diplomat, not a warmonger. I've presented our evidence and our requests. The decision now belongs to this body. She looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many delegates as she could. But understand this. Humanity will not be sacrificed on the altar of political convenience. We extended our hand in friendship when we joined the galactic community. We still offer that hand, but we are prepared if it is slapped away. The council chamber remained silent as the implications settled over the delegates. The newest species in the galaxy had just revealed itself to be far more dangerous and far more prepared than anyone had imagined. High Arbiter Voltuk leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking in what might have been respect. The council will recess for deliberation, he announced. Ambassador Vega, you have given us much to consider. The council chamber remained tense as delegates whispered urgently to one another during the recess. Eleanor stood motionless on the central platform, her posture relaxed despite being the focus of hundreds of alien stares. The Draxian delegation huddled in an angry cluster, Ambassador Krex gesturing violently as he conferred with his advisors. A soft chime indicated the end of recess as High Arbiter Voltuk returned to his position. The chamber quieted immediately. The council acknowledges the gravity of Earth's claims, Voltuk began, his deep voice echoing through the hall. However, military threats cannot be the foundation of galactic diplomacy. Your vessels must stand down, Ambassador Vega. Eleanor kept her expression neutral. With respect, Arbiter, our vessels are merely ensuring that justice has the opportunity to prevail. They will withdraw when the council commits to a formal investigation. You dare dictate terms? Ambassador Krex interrupted, his scaled face flushing with a greenish tint of rage. This is extortion. The council will not be coerced by primitives barely a century into spaceflight. Eleanor didn't respond to Krex directly. Instead, she addressed the entire chamber. Distinguished representatives, I have not yet shown you the full extent of our evidence. If I may, without waiting for permission, she tapped her lapel pin again. The main view screen changed to display a 3-dimensional star chart of Draxian territory and its borders. Red markers appeared, spreading outward like a disease. These red markers indicate Draxian expansions over the past 15 cycles, Eleanor explained. Each represents a world or outpost that was previously independent or belonged to another species. The display zoomed in on the nearest red marker, the mining colony of Alteris IV, claimed by the Draxians after an alleged pirate attack destroyed its defenses. Another marker enlarged. The agricultural world Gen Prime, annexed following a mysterious crop failure that left them dependent on Draxian aid. Murmurs grew as pattern after pattern appeared. World suffering convenient disasters, followed by Draxian assistance that never departed. Humanity's colony at Proxima Centauri was simply the latest in a systematic campaign of expansion, Eleanor continued. But what makes our case different is that we anticipated it, she gestured, and the display changed again to show encrypted communications between Draxian leadership and representatives from the resource-hungry Morrican. Consortium plans to strip mine Proxima once the human population was relocated, Ambassador. Techless of the Gen Collective rose suddenly. Arbiter, my government never reported the loss of Gen Prime because we feared retribution. But this human speaks truth. The same pattern befell our world. Another delegate stood, a representative from the Altari Republic. Alteris IV was not destroyed by pirates. We have long suspected Draxian involvement, but lacked proof until now. More representatives rose, each sharing similar stories, smaller powers that had suffered in silence, believing themselves too insignificant to challenge a founding member of the council. Krex slammed his clawed hand against his console. These are fabrications. The human has clearly manipulated these lesser species into supporting their false narrative. High Arbiter Voltuk raised all four of his hands for silence. Ambassador Vega, your evidence is compelling, but the source remains problematic. This phantom protocol you mentioned, such widespread surveillance violates numerous privacy statutes. Eleanor nodded, acknowledging the point. The phantom protocol was activated specifically because Earth recognized the pattern I've just shown you. Article 23 permits such monitoring when reasonable suspicion exists. We had that suspicion from the moment we studied Council history and identified the Draxians' expansion methods. She paused, letting her words sink in. But if the Council prefers, we can deactivate the protocol and rely solely on the testimonies of affected worlds, assuming they'll be granted a fair hearing. An alert sounded throughout the chamber. The main view screen changed without Eleanor's input, showing a Draxian battle fleet emerging from hyperspace near Earth. Krex's laughter filled the chamber. Did you think we wouldn't have contingencies of our own, human? While you threaten our homeworld, our main fleet approaches yours. For the first time, Eleanor's composure wavered slightly. She hadn't expected this direct escalation. She tapped her communicator urgently. Admiral Keyes, activate Aegis protocol immediately. The view screen split to show Earth orbit, where the approaching Draxian fleet suddenly slowed. Their ships shuddered visibly as they encountered an invisible barrier. The Aegis shield, Eleanor explained, her confidence returning. A planetary defense system we developed after studying ancient technology found in our solar system. Your weapons can't penetrate it. Your ships can't approach within 10,000 kilometers. Impossible, Krex sputtered. No species has successfully integrated precursor tech on a planetary scale. Humanity has always excelled at adaptation, Eleanor replied. She turned back to the Council. What you're witnessing is the difference between species who seek power and those who prepare for defense. Earth developed the Aegis shield not to conquer, but to ensure we would never be conquered. She gestured toward the smaller representatives who had spoken up. How many worlds might have been saved if they'd had similar protection? How many colonies might still exist if the Council had enforced its own charter? High Arbiter Voltuk conferred briefly with other senior Council members before addressing the chamber again. In light of these developments and the corroborating testimonies, the Council will establish an emergency investigative body to examine all Draxian territorial actions of the past 20 cycles. Eleanor nodded in satisfaction, but Voltuk wasn't finished. However, Ambassador Vega, Earth's military vessels must withdraw from Draxian space as a show of good faith. The Council cannot condone military threats regardless of justification. Of course, Eleanor agreed. Admiral Keyes, initiate withdrawal once the investigation parameters are formally established. The chamber relaxed slightly as the human vessels began to decloak and move away from the Draxian homeworld. But Ambassador Krex wasn't ready to admit defeat. This changes nothing, he hissed. An investigation will find no wrongdoing, and when it's complete, Earth will answer for its aggression and espionage. Eleanor turned to face him directly. Ambassador Krex, I suggest you consider your position carefully. The evidence against your government is substantial and growing. More worlds are coming forward with similar experiences? She gestured toward the view screen, which now showed multiple diplomatic channels opening as other species contacted Earth directly, bypassing Council protocols. Humanity didn't come here just to defend itself. We came to ensure that what happened to us doesn't happen again, to anyone. Krex's eyes narrowed dangerously. You have no idea what you've started, human. On the contrary, Eleanor replied calmly. We know exactly what we're doing. The question is, do you? As the emergency session continued, the balance of power in the chamber shifted visibly. Smaller delegations moved their seating positions closer to Earth's section, while traditional allies of the Draxians found reasons to distance themselves. High Arbiter Voltuk observed it all with his four eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sign of deep thought in his species. A human diplomat had just transformed centuries of political balance in a single session. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency investigation progressed faster than anyone anticipated. 3 days after the confrontation in the Council chamber, Eleanor stood in a secure communication room adjacent to her diplomatic quarters, reviewing the preliminary findings with Admiral Keyes. His holographic projection showed him aboard the command vessel Vigilant, positioned just beyond the edge of the solar system. "It's worse than we thought, Ambassador," Keyes reported, his weathered face grim. "The investigation team has uncovered evidence of at least 23 unauthorized Draxian annexations in the past decade alone. Their pattern is consistent. Create or exploit a crisis, offer assistance, then establish permanent control." Eleanor nodded slowly. "And the Morrican connection?" "Confirmed. The Draxians supplied the heavy metals and rare isotopes for Morrican manufacturing. In exchange, the Morricans provided military technology that wasn't covered by Council trade restrictions." A soft chime indicated another incoming transmission. Eleanor accepted it, and a second hologram appeared. Council investigator Linza, a Trellian whose six-fingered hands moved constantly as she spoke. "Ambassador Vega, we've discovered something disturbing," Linza began without preamble. "The Draxian delegation has been accessing restricted Council communication channels. They've sent encrypted messages to several military outposts along your border." Eleanor felt a chill run through her. "They're planning something." "Almost certainly," Linza agreed. "I've alerted High Arbiter Voltuk, but protocol requires evidence before a third communication channel activated automatically, overriding security protocols." The image of High Arbiter Voltuk appeared, his normally composed features tense with urgency. "Ambassador Vega, you must return to the Council chamber immediately. The Draxian delegation has called for an emergency vote to suspend Earth's membership and protections, citing your surveillance as violations of galactic law." Eleanor exchanged glances with Admiral Keyes. "A diversion. They're trying to nullify our legal protections before they strike." "I concur," Voltuk said, "but the vote must proceed according to protocol. You have 30 minutes to prepare your defense." As the transmission ended, Eleanor turned to Keyes. "Admiral, implement defensive posture Delta. If the Draxians make any aggressive moves, I want to know immediately." "Understood, Ambassador." "The fleet stands ready." Eleanor arrived at the Council chamber 28 minutes later, composed and focused despite the crisis. The tiered seating was only partially filled. Many delegates hadn't had time to return from their homeworlds for this sudden session. She noted with concern that most of the delegates present were Draxian allies. Ambassador Krex stood at the central platform, his scaled face set in an expression of righteous indignation as he addressed the chamber. "Distinguished representatives, Earth has admitted to maintaining an illegal surveillance network throughout Council space. This phantom protocol violates the most basic rights of sovereign worlds. I move to immediately suspend Earth's membership and protections pending a full investigation into their espionage activities." High Arbiter Voltuk acknowledged the motion but turned toward Eleanor. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Vega of Earth. You may present your defense." Eleanor took her place on the secondary platform, her voice steady as she addressed the partial assembly. "The timing of this motion is highly suspicious, coming just as the investigation into Draxian treaty violations begins to uncover widespread evidence of illegal annexations. This is clearly an attempt to discredit Earth and halt the investigation." She tapped her communicator, and the chamber's main view screen displayed the text of Article 23. Subsection 7. The Charter explicitly permits defensive monitoring when reasonable suspicion of treaty violations exists. Earth activated the Phantom Protocol legally and with just cause. Krex interrupted with a dismissive gesture. "The human deliberately misinterprets the Charter. Article 23 permits limited monitoring of specific activities, not comprehensive surveillance of an entire species." Before Eleanor could respond, the chamber doors slid open. Representatives from the Altari Republic, the Gen Collective, and a dozen other smaller powers entered in a unified group. Leading them was Ambassador Teclis of the Gen. "The Council will not proceed with this vote without full representation," Teclis announced firmly. "We were deliberately given insufficient notice of this session." Krex sputtered in outrage, but Voltuk raised his hands for order. "Ambassador Teclis raises a valid procedural objection. All members must receive standard notification for votes affecting Council membership." "This is obstruction," Krex shouted, his composure cracking. "The humans have clearly manipulated these minor powers into supporting them." Ambassador Laran of the Altari Republic stepped forward. "We support justice, not Earth specifically. Our worlds have suffered Draxian aggression and silence for too long. If Earth surveillance revealed these violations, then we consider it justified. Eleanor watched as the chamber's dynamic shifted again. The smaller powers were no longer willing to be sidelined. Something unprecedented was forming, a coalition of minor species finding their collective voice. Suddenly, alarm signals blared throughout the chamber. The main view screen changed to show tactical displays of Draxian vessels moving aggressively toward multiple targets, including Earth's colony on Mars and the headquarters of the Altari Republic. What is the meaning of this? Voltuk demanded, turning to Krex. The Draxian ambassador's expression shifted from outrage to something closer to panic. These are defensive repositionings only. Our forces are responding to potential threats identified by our intelligence services. Eleanor kept her voice level despite her rising anger. Arbiter, I believe we're witnessing the Draxian response to the failure of their political maneuver. Having failed to strip Earth of its protections through council procedures, they're resorting to military action. She tapped her communicator again. Admiral Keyes, status report. The Admiral's voice filled the chamber. Draxian battle groups have entered aggressive formations near Mars colony and along the borders of multiple worlds that testified against them. They've ignored standard communication protocols and warning buoys. Eleanor addressed the council directly. Earth will not stand idle while the Draxians threaten our colonies or our allies. Admiral, you have authorization to deploy defensive measures as required. On the view screen, small objects detached from seemingly empty space near each Draxian formation. Stealth defense platforms that had been hidden in strategic locations throughout Council space. Automated defense systems only, Eleanor clarified for the Council's benefit. No human vessels are engaging. These platforms will create defensive fields around threatened worlds and colonies, similar to Earth's Aegis shield but scaled for smaller populations. The Draxian ships slowed as they encountered the unexpected resistance. Several attempted to fire weapons only to have their energy beams dissipate harmlessly against the defensive fields. High Arbiter Voltuk turned to Krex, all four of his eyes narrowed in rare display of anger. Ambassador Krex, your government has just committed an act of war against multiple council members, while a formal investigation into your prior violations is underway. This is unprecedented. Krex's scales had paled to a sickly gray. This is a misunderstanding. Our forces were merely silence. Voltuk thundered, striking his ceremonial staff against the floor. The evidence is before us all. The Council hereby suspends the Draxian hegemony's voting rights pending a full security review. Your military forces will stand down immediately, or the Council will authorize a peacekeeping intervention. Eleanor watched as Krex's political support evaporated. Even his traditional allies were distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with such a blatant violation of Council protocols. Ambassador Vega, Voltuk continued, the Council owes Earth an apology. Your Phantom Protocol, while controversial, has revealed a serious threat to galactic stability. The emergency investigation will continue with expanded parameters. Eleanor nodded in acknowledgement. Earth appreciates the Council's commitment to justice. Our defensive systems will remain active until the Draxian forces withdraw. But we have no desire for escalation. As the Draxian ships began reluctantly retreating from their aggressive positions, Eleanor received a private message from Admiral Keyes. Well played, Ambassador. They took the bait perfectly. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. The Draxians had indeed reacted exactly as predicted, with force rather than diplomacy, exposing their true nature to the entire Council. Their attempt to discredit Earth had instead accelerated their own downfall. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had just proven itself to be not just a new player, but a catalyst for transformation. 1 week after the Draxian military withdrawal, Eleanor found herself in an unexpected location, aboard a Council diplomatic vessel heading toward the edge of known space. Beside her stood High Arbiter Voltuk, Ambassador Teclis of the Gen Collective, and representatives from 5 other species who had suffered Draxian aggression. I still don't understand why this meeting couldn't happen at Council headquarters, Eleanor said, watching stars streak by through the observation window. Voltuk's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that Eleanor had learned indicated thoughtfulness in his species. Some matters require discretion, Ambassador Vega. What I am about to show you cannot become public knowledge yet. The ship slowed as it approached what appeared to be empty space. Eleanor was about to question this when a massive structure began to shimmer into view. A space station unlike any she had seen before, with architecture that seemed to blend elements from dozens of different species. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Voltuk said quietly, "a project that began 20 cycles ago, when some of us first suspected the Draxians were violating territorial agreements." The ship docked with the station, and the delegation was escorted to a large chamber filled with holographic displays showing various sectors of Council space. Council Security Director Malov, a Trellian known for her uncompromising dedication to galactic law, greeted them. "Thank you for coming," Malov began. "What you see here is the result of a covert investigation spanning 2 decades. We've been monitoring the Draxians since they annexed the Illidar system under suspicious circumstances. She activated a central display showing a complex network of connections between the Draxian hegemony and various criminal organizations, resource cartels, and even certain council officials. We've identified a pattern of corruption and manipulation far beyond what your Phantom Protocol detected, Ambassador Vega. The Draxians haven't just been annexing territories, they've been systematically undermining the Council itself." Eleanor studied the display carefully. "Why show me this now? Why not bring this evidence to the full Council?" "Because we lacked actionable proof," Malov explained. "We had patterns and correlations, but nothing that would stand up to formal scrutiny, until your confrontation forced the Draxians to act openly." Ambassador Teclis stepped forward. "When you revealed your surveillance evidence, you gave us the opening we needed. The emergency investigation triggered by Earth's complaint has given us legal authority to access records that were previously protected by privacy statutes. And what we've found is damning," Voltuk added. "The Draxian leadership has been engaged in a long-term strategy to destabilize multiple sectors, creating conditions that justify their intervention and eventual annexation." Eleanor processed this information, her diplomatic training helping her maintain a calm exterior despite her shock. "So Earth's colony at Proxima Centauri was targeted specifically because your species represents a potential threat to their plans," Malov confirmed. "Your technological adaptation rate exceeds Council averages by a significant margin. The Draxian analysis predicted that within 50 cycles, humanity would become a major power. So they decided to cut us down while we were still finding our footing," Eleanor concluded. "Classic preventive aggression." Voltuk's expression was grave. "Precisely. But they underestimated your species' paranoia, or perhaps your prudence. Your Phantom Protocol and Aegis Shield suggest humans prepare for betrayal as a matter of course." Eleanor couldn't help but smile slightly. "We have a long history of conflicts among our own nations. It taught us to hope for the best but prepare for the worst." The meeting continued for hours as Malov revealed the full extent of the Draxian conspiracy. Their ultimate goal appeared to be nothing less than restructuring the Council itself, creating a hierarchy with the Draxians at the apex and other species relegated to subordinate roles based on their usefulness. "This brings us to why you're here," Voltuk said finally. "The full Council session tomorrow will review the preliminary findings of the emergency investigation. We expect the Draxians to mount a vigorous defense, claiming your evidence was fabricated or misinterpreted. They'll try to shift focus back to Earth's surveillance activities," Teclis added. "They'll argue that the Phantom Protocol represents a greater threat to Council stability than their territorial expansions." Eleanor nodded. "A standard deflection strategy. Attack the source of the accusation rather than addressing the accusation itself." "Exactly," Malov agreed, "which is why we need to coordinate our approach. The evidence from Sanctuary must be introduced carefully, or the Draxians will claim it was obtained illegally." As they discussed strategy for the upcoming session, Eleanor received an urgent communication from Admiral Keyes. She excused herself to take it privately. "Ambassador, we've detected unusual activity in the Draxian diplomatic compound," Keyes reported. "Their entire delegation appears to be preparing for immediate departure, despite tomorrow's critical Council session." Eleanor felt a surge of alarm. "They're running. It appears so. And there's more. We've intercepted fragmented communication suggesting some kind of final protocol being activated." She returned to the main chamber, interrupting the ongoing discussion. "I believe the Draxians are about to abandon diplomatic pretenses entirely. My military advisors report they're preparing to flee council space, possibly after activating some kind of contingency plan. Malov immediately moved to a communication console. Security teams implement lockdown procedures at all Draxian facilities immediately. Priority Alpha. Voltuk turned to Eleanor, his normally composed features showing genuine concern. If they've activated a final protocol, millions of lives could be at risk. The Draxians have access to prohibited weapons technology through their black market connections. We need to return to Council headquarters immediately, Eleanor said, and I need to contact Earth. The journey back was tense, filled with urgent communications and contingency planning. By the time they arrived, the situation had deteriorated significantly. The Draxian delegation had indeed attempted to flee, but had been detained by Council security forces. Ambassador Krex was being held in isolation after a failed suicide attempt. The Council chamber was in chaos when Eleanor entered. Representatives from dozens of worlds were demanding information, protection, or both. High Arbiter Voltuk took his position and called repeatedly for order. Distinguished representatives, he finally managed when the noise subsided somewhat. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Draxian leadership has activated what they call the Severance Protocol, a network of destructive devices planted on worlds throughout Council space. Gasps and shouts filled the chamber. Eleanor stepped forward onto the central platform without waiting to be recognized. The Draxians believed that if they couldn't control the Council, they would destabilize it, she announced, her voice cutting through the panic. But humanity anticipated this possibility. She activated her communicator. Admiral Keyes, initiate Guardian Protocol. On the main view screen, a new display appeared. A galactic map showing hundreds of small blue dots activating near the red markers that indicated Draxian devices. When we deployed our defensive platforms last week, we included specialized containment units designed to identify and neutralize Draxian weapon signatures, Eleanor explained. They've been scanning for exactly this kind of threat since deployment. The chamber watched in tense silence as the blue dots converged on the red ones. In most locations, the red signatures winked out as the containment unit successfully neutralized the threats. But in several places, the red dots pulsed with increasing intensity. We can't stop all of them, Eleanor acknowledged grimly. Some devices are already too close to activation. Admiral, deploy emergency response teams to the highlighted locations immediately. Voltuk stepped forward to stand beside her. The Council hereby authorizes all available resources for evacuation and containment efforts. This is no longer about politics or justice, it is about survival. As the crisis response mobilized across Council space, Eleanor found herself at the center of a new coalition forming in real time. Species that had never cooperated now working together against a common threat. The Draxian attempt to sow chaos had instead created unprecedented unity. Hours later, the initial emergency had passed. 17 worlds had suffered damage from Draxian devices that couldn't be neutralized in time. But the casualties were far fewer than they might have been without the human containment units. The full extent of the Draxian conspiracy lay exposed for the entire galaxy to see. Not just territorial ambitions, but a willingness to commit mass murder when those ambitions were thwarted. High Arbiter Voltuk approached Eleanor as she coordinated with Earth's relief ships. Your species prepared not just for betrayal but for atrocity, he observed quietly. Such thoroughness is disturbing, yet today it saved countless lives. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Humans understand darkness because we've faced our own. We prepared for the worst from the Draxians because we know what intelligent beings are capable of when power is their only value. 1 month after the Draxian crisis, the Galactic Council chamber had transformed. The old tiered seating that had separated major and minor powers was gone, replaced by a circular arrangement where all representatives sat at the same level. At the center, a new platform accommodated not 1 speaker but 5, representing the newly formed Council Leadership Committee. Eleanor entered the chamber, noting the changes with satisfaction. The emergency had accelerated reforms that might otherwise have taken decades. She took her seat in Earth's section, nodding to Ambassador Teclis and the other representatives who had become unexpected allies. High Arbiter Voltuk, now first among equals on the leadership committee, called the historic session to order. Distinguished representatives of the galactic community, Today we gather to formalize the most significant reforms in Council history. The main view screen displayed the text of what was already being called the Vega Protocols, named not after Eleanor herself, as she had strongly objected to that, but after the star system where Earth's defensive technology had first been tested. The recent crisis exposed fundamental flaws in our governance structure, Voltuk continued. For too long, power has been concentrated among founding members, allowing corruption to take root and go unchallenged. The Vega Protocols will establish new balances to prevent such abuses. Eleanor listened as Voltuk outlined the key reforms: rotating membership on the leadership committee to prevent permanent power blocks, independent investigative bodies with representatives from both major and minor powers, a mutual defense agreement that would extend protection technologies to vulnerable worlds, and most controversially, a restructured monitoring system based on Earth's Phantom Protocol but with multi-species oversight. When the presentation concluded, Voltuk turned toward Earth's section. The Council recognizes Ambassador Vega. Eleanor stepped onto one of the 5 central platforms, facing the assembled representatives of hundreds of worlds. Distinguished colleagues, she began, deliberately choosing a term that emphasized equality. 1 month ago, the Draxian hegemony attempted to destroy what they couldn't control. They failed because preparation met opportunity, because Earth's defenses were in place when the crisis came. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces and features of incredible diversity, some with too many eyes, some with none at all, some not even recognizable as faces to human perception. But our preparation alone would not have been enough. It was the courage of worlds like the Altari Republic and the Gen Collective, speaking truth despite fear, that truly changed the course of history. It was the integrity of leaders like Arbiter Voltuk and Director Malov, who pursued justice even when politically inconvenient. Eleanor gestured toward the text of the Vega Protocols. These reforms aren't about creating a new power structure with humanity at its center. They're about ensuring that no species, including humans, can ever again use the Council for territorial ambition or domination. Ambassador Lomat of the Morrican Consortium rose to speak. The Morricans had been the Draxians' primary trading partners, and their initial response to the crisis had been defensive and hostile. But as evidence of Draxian manipulation had emerged, showing how the Morricans themselves had been exploited, their position had evolved. 1 month ago, I would have opposed these reforms, Lomat acknowledged. I would have seen them as Earth attempting to impose its will on the galaxy. But I have witnessed something unprecedented, a species with power choosing restraint. He turned to face Eleanor directly. When the Draxian weapons were neutralized, Earth's military vessels had positioned themselves to potentially control key trade routes and strategic locations. You could have demanded concessions. Instead, you withdrew and offered assistance without conditions. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Earth's response to the crisis had indeed been surprising to many, offering defensive technology freely rather than using it as leverage. The Morrican Consortium supports the Vega Protocols, Lomat concluded. Not because we fear Earth, but because we respect what Earth represents, the possibility of power exercised with wisdom. One by one, representatives rose to declare their positions. The reforms were not universally popular. Some traditional powers objected to losing their privileged status, while some minor species worried about the implications of the monitoring system. But the momentum was undeniable. When the final vote was tallied, the protocols passed with an overwhelming majority. As the session concluded, Eleanor received a private message from Admiral Keyes. Congratulations, Ambassador. Earth's security is now tied to galactic stability, exactly as we hoped. She smiled slightly at the message. Earth's strategy had indeed been calculated, but not in the way most Council species assumed. Humanity hadn't sought to replace the Draxians as a dominant power. They had recognized that true security could only come from a balanced system where no single species controlled the others. High Arbiter Voltuk approached as the chamber began to empty. A significant achievement, Ambassador Vega. But now the real work begins, implementing these reforms across thousands of worlds with centuries of established practices. Eleanor nodded. Earth stands ready to assist in that implementation, particularly with the defensive technologies. The Aegis shield has already been adapted for 15 different planetary environments. Yes, I've seen the reports, Voltuk replied. But I remain curious about one thing. Your species prepared so thoroughly for betrayal. The surveillance network, the defensive systems, the containment units. Yet you've now agreed to place those systems under shared control. Aren't you concerned about vulnerability? Eleanor considered the question carefully. There's an old human saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Earth could maintain independent security systems, but at the cost of perpetual isolation and suspicion. By sharing our technology and accepting oversight, we create something more valuable than perfect security. We create trust. Voltuk's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. An interesting perspective. Not one the Draxians would have understood. And that was their fundamental error, Eleanor replied. They saw other species only as potential threats or useful tools. They couldn't conceive of genuine alliance based on mutual benefit. As they walked together toward the chamber exit, a communication alert sounded. The main view screen activated to show a live feed from the former Draxian homeworld, where rehabilitation teams were helping the population transition to a new governance system. 1. Without the military leadership that had driven their expansion policy, the provisional government has officially ratified the Vega protocols, announced the team leader. They've also submitted formal apologies to all worlds affected by their former leadership's actions, along with a comprehensive reparations proposal. Eleanor watched the feed with mixed emotions. The Draxian people would face a difficult transition, but they had been given something their leaders never offered others, the chance to determine their own future. They broke the treaty, Voltuk observed quietly, and brought about their own doom just as you warned in that first confrontation. Eleanor shook her head slightly. Not doom, transformation. The Draxian hegemony is finished, but the Draxian people have an opportunity to become something better. 3 days later, Eleanor prepared to depart for Earth. Her diplomatic mission, originally planned for 3 years, had been extended indefinitely as she took a position on the implementation committee for the Vega protocols. As her shuttle left the council station, she looked back at the massive structure, once an intimidating symbol of power beyond Earth's reach, now the center of a transformed galactic order that humanity had helped create. Admiral Keyes' voice came through her private communicator. Heading home for a well-deserved break, Ambassador? Just a brief visit, Eleanor replied. Too much work remains here. Indeed. The Security Council has reviewed your latest reports. They're impressed with how effectively you leveraged our preparations. Eleanor smiled slightly. The preparations were essential. But what really changed everything was what we didn't prepare for. Allies who stood with us when they could have remained silent. Leaders who chose principle over politics. The shuttle accelerated toward the transit point that would take her back to Earth. Behind her, throughout Council space, defensive shields were being activated around formerly vulnerable worlds. Monitoring systems were being placed under multi-species oversight committees, and investigation teams were continuing to unravel the full extent of Draxian manipulation. The Draxians had broken the treaty, never imagining that their actions would lead not just to their own downfall, but to a fundamental reordering of the galaxy they had sought to dominate. All because one human diplomat had come prepared for betrayal, but remained open to a better possibility.